All
Alrighty.
right, boys. We have a podcast going. Let's
We're
go.
back. We're
We're
back.
back for the season's finale of season 1, which definitely should have been like months ago.
Yeah, but we got a well-deserved break. A well-needed break, I might say.
Yes. Welcome back to Dancing for Architecture. It feels good to be back recording. I'm super duper excited for this episode. Today we're going to be doing sort of a wrap up for season 1, but also this is a great jumping off point for the podcast if you haven't listened to any of it and you're just like, I don't know where to start. This is a great one to listen to. Because we're going to be going through talking about which albums we really liked, which episodes we really liked, and we're also going to be ranking all of the links of the day. So that is hype.
Yes, sir. Yep, it's kind of a culminating event of sorts.
But yeah, let's just jump on into it. So to start off, we're going to talk about our favorite episodes. These are the ones that we thought that we did a great job breaking down the albums and just kind of like everything about it, and just kind of good jumping off points into the rest of the podcast. The first one that we have picked is Jacob Collier's In My Room.
Yes.
Just a great starting point.
Yeah, it was just a really fun episode to record. It was our first one. We had like the adrenaline. We were like, yo, we're doing a podcast. Let's go. And then we had a bunch of our like friends on there. I think that's still to this day our most viewed one on YouTube. So
Yeah, I think our first episode is still our most viewed episode. It's definitely a really good starting point for the series. I think what was also really great about it is I feel like it was a culmination of a bunch of our conversations that we had before we started the podcast.
yeah.
Like we just kind of geeked out about Jacob Collier together, and then we just recorded that, and then I actually took the time to put down into words everything that I thought about the first album, and then I just noticed a bunch of stuff, and I was just like, oh shoot, this is a
Yeah.
dank album.
It definitely laid the groundworks for our dynamic and just the aesthetic of the podcast. Like, if people think they're coming in to hear like some expert, I don't know, just they figured out by like 10 minutes, like, oh, this is like a vibe, you know?
Yeah, we're not trying to be condescending or pretentious. We're just trying to vibe and let y'all in on ye old
We
vibes.
just be liking music. Simple.
Yes. You want to give them the second album that we want to recommend, or second episode rather?
Second episode. I'll do the Black Parade. So yeah, our second one is the Black Parade. That was a really fun episode. I personally really enjoyed it because the only other punk rock I had listened to was maybe some 90s punk and then like a bunch of Paramore, but like I really enjoyed it. It was a concept album. I was going crazy looking up lyrics and commentaries and looking at the videos. It was so fun.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's one of my favorite albums of all time, and I'm so happy that we got to talk about it. Also, this is the only one of the three of them that I had a good mic for. So, like, this is
Yeah.
also just like, I think that this one sets a good standard for what we want our podcast to be going forward, because it was just like, okay, Ryan's got a good mic, we vibing, great stuff, great lyrical breakdown. But I think our best episode to date has to be the Continuum episode.
Yes, that one is still the best episode. It had an amazing flow. We had authentic conversation, especially around the Stop This Train area. We had just such good input, and you know, John Mayer made it easy because his lyrics were just so good. But yeah,
Yeah, Continuum was a great album. I think I loved this episode. It's probably my favorite find of the series of like albums I hadn't really listened to before us jumping into them on the podcast. But man, it's such a good album. Like I love the we'll save this for when we get to actually talking about the album, but again, I think that we were able to just kind of talk about a lot of different things, and I feel like there was a healthy balance between lyrical dive and like production and music analysis. And I think that it's probably our best episode to date as far as content goes. Obviously, I didn't have the good mic yet, but still a freaking great episode.
what was that, like episode 4 or 5?
I believe it was episode 5.
Something. Yeah, that was like the midsection of our podcast. That's cool.
Yeah, so now we're gonna rank all of the links of the day really quick. I promised this last week, or not last week, last episode, however long ago that was. And let's get into it. So I'm gonna run through my list really quick. I'm gonna go from 11 all the way up to 9 because we had 2 bonus links. In 11th I have Funk Dojo. In 10th I have Toad Lang Syne. In ninth I have the 9+10 Vine. I mean, these are all good videos, but like they were just kind of lulls for a second or whatever. And then in 8th we had the Hee Hee compilation of like the Michael Jackson like hee hee whoo and all that. And then the Beatles Super Mario mashup, and then Blart Side of the Mall. These are when they start to really get good. I love all these links of the day. And then we have Elmo getting, well, I forget what the exact title of the video is.
The Rock, yeah.
But yeah, Elmo basically getting gaslit by a rock for 6 minutes. That video is freaking hysterical. And then the Beatles in one headphone. And then in the top 3, I have the Value Select You're Slightly Late and I'm Having a Panic Attack song. For 3rd, I have the Jacob Collier YouTube Poop, the one with Herbie Hancock. That's
Right.
just hysterical.
Goated.
And then the Wii theme September made using the Wii theme is my favorite link of the day. That is just one of my personal favorite videos of all time, and I'm so glad that it exists on the internet. And the fact that it's a link of the day makes me very happy.
Yeah. All right. Mine was very different. I liked all the videos, but I think 11th was the 9+10 21. I was like, Vine.
We literally just did that for the bit. Like, it was quite literally for the bit.
I had died. I had killed that meme a while ago. But I had You're Slightly Late after that, even though I really liked that video. And then Beatles Mario after that. MJ compilation of like the noises after that. And then the Beatles One Earphone after that. Blart Side of the Mall after that.
So we both had that one at 6th, I think?
Yeah, directly in the center.
We both had that in the center. Interesting.
That is very interesting. And then We September was Heat. Then Funk the Dojo. And then Toad sang Lang Syne. YouTube Poop Jacob. And then Elmo was my favorite link.
Elmo was your favorite link? That's
Yes.
hilarious. That was not even music related at all.
It wasn't, but I was dying. I'm not gonna lie.
Like I couldn't in good conscience put that as my favorite video of the links of the day because it's not even music related. I was just like, okay, like it's just not. But yeah, no, that video was freaking hysterical. And I think the main reason that I didn't like the Funk Dojo as much as you did was probably because I don't play guitar like at all. And so I'm just like, this is cool and all, but I don't play guitar.
Yeah, I liked how educational it was, but then also like kawaii, you know.
Comment below your favorite link of the day.
Rocky's
yes.
a rock.
Rocco! Rocco doesn't need watching!
It was hilarious. Anyway, albums. Favorite
Yes.
albums.
So for this section, neither of us have looked at each other's list. This is all going to be reactions of like, really? That's interesting.
Yup.
But how we're going to do this is we're going to go 3 albums at a time. So that way we're not like, oh, it's interesting that you have this in 9th because I also have this in 9th or whatever, you know? And instead of doing it like one at a time, we'll each read off our 3 and then we'll just kind of talk about them as a collective. And we'll go bottom 3, middle 3, and then we'll end with a top 3.
Bet.
So you want to go first? You want to read me your bottom 3?
All right, so I can start with my bottom 3. This was actually hard. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
I know
but-
they're all super good albums. Like I was just like,
and
I feel bad for putting these in bottom 3.
yeah, the vibe I was on when I made this list might even be different than what I think now. But like, I was like, I'm just gonna stick to one and go with it. So bottom 3, I had Song for America 9th. I had Baby I Miss You for 8th, and then Dark Side of the Moon 7th. Now I'm thinking I have Dark Side of the Moon on 7th, but I'd probably move it up now. But that's where I was when I made this ranking.
That's really interesting. We share 2 albums in bottom 9. So I have Thriller at 9th,
Okay.
Song for America in 8th, and Baby I Miss You at 7th. So I think we're probably both in the same boat for Baby I Miss You just because it's kind of like something that's so far out from what we usually listen to that we're just like,
Yeah.
it's not going to go up much higher.
It's very much an experiment. and it went well. I mean, I liked the album, don't get me wrong, but compared to like these other ones that were like prolific quintessential albums of their time, they were just, compared to that, maybe I misuse like a vibe when you're, doing playing chess as the episode is titled.
Yes. I think definitely this album would be much higher if you just handed me a list of like, here's 10 random albums, or here's 9 random albums rather.
Right.
I really enjoy this album, but like if you just hand me a list of a bunch of records that you don't really have any emotional attachment to, like I don't know if you threw like a Justin Bieber album on the list, it's just like nope, this album's going way higher. And Song for America I think falls into the same boat. I think for me it very much suffered from the fact that there was very much one standout track, and while the rest of the album was interesting to be sure, like nothing really compared to the title track. I think we talked for like 8 minutes just about that song or something in the initial episode. Like we talked for a while about just the title track, but I think for me I'm not super inclined to go back to the whole album
right
as much.
What was the one track that was like the certified thick? It was like Devil's something.
I think it was Devil Game, yeah.
Yeah, that one was
just kind of
good,
pretty hard.
But I'm not even gonna lie, I haven't even went back to it since we listened, even though it was good.
Yeah, I only listened to the album like once in preparation for this episode. I went back and listened to every single album once when we were getting ready to record this, and yeah, it's just I think it also kind of shows its age a little bit. It's very clearly from the 70s. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think for me, I like albums that age very well. Like albums that it's like you can very clearly see what they influenced. But then there's like albums where I feel like it's like, okay, like with Thriller, for instance, this is an album that you can very clearly see is like, okay, this influenced a lot of pop going forward. I have it as my 9th because I'm just not the biggest fan of the genre.
Right.
And also there were a few tracks on there that I wasn't the biggest fan of. It was just like I don't hate any of the tracks. It's just like I feel like the singles from that album really carry it in my book.
Bet. So middle 3, you can start with this one.
Middle 3. All right. This is where we start to get to some of the albums that I go back to quite a bit. So in 6th I have 21 by Adele.
Ooh.
In 5th I have Abbey Road by the Beatles. And in 4th I have In My Room by Jacob Collier.
That is interesting. So I have in 6th Abbey Road, 5th Black Parade, which I probably would move up now. Like
really?
Dark Side and Black Parade I'd probably move up, but yeah, I have that 5th, and then In My Room 4th. So we shared Abbey Road and In My Room for the middle.
Yeah. Definitely talk a little bit more about Dark Side of the Moon, because you had mentioned you would move it up earlier, but we kind of skipped over it before you got a chance to talk about it.
Yeah, so I had it lower. I don't know where I was when I ranked it, but like now that I'm thinking about it, it had a lot of standout tracks. It's so hard. Like this is very difficult, but like I really enjoyed Money. I loved, what was it? The one that was supposed to emulate like the one where lead singer was like belting like
Great Gig in the Sky. Great
yes,
Gig in the Sky.
that was amazing. That and Money and just the whole concept in itself. Like I would definitely move it into this middle 3 or even the top 3. I'm not even gonna lie.
Really interesting. We'll definitely talk more about it once we get to my top 3 because I haven't said it yet, so it's in my top 3.
Okay.
But yeah, let's talk about Abbey Road since we both had that one on there. I love this album. It's a very, very good album. It is one of the most iconic album covers of all time. It has some of my favorite Beatles songs ever. Like it has Maxwell's Silver Hammer. Come on, like that's sort of my meme pick for my favorite Beatles song, but I really genuinely enjoy it. And then it also has like pretty much the entire first half is a bunch of bangers, and the medley in the second half is just really cool.
Bang.
The sequencing as a whole, some of the best of anything I've heard out of that era. But I think kind of the reason that it didn't get much higher is it does sort of show its age a little bit, but that's just because it's like from the 60s and they only had so much recording technology. But I really like this album. It's very good.
Yeah, Abbey Road. So I think I share that with you that it had a lot of catchy songs. Like, what was it? Oh, darling, that goes hard. I've listened to that after the podcast several
That might
times.
be my favorite song on that album.
Yeah,
It
I've
it
listened to
really
that
might be. It's so
several times
good.
after. As well as surprisingly, I listened to Golden. What was it? Golden Slumbers or
Oh,
something.
that's like such a great lullaby.
Yeah, and surprisingly, I
Golden
listened to
sun.
that after the podcast too. So I was surprised by that, but I that was a pick that like I listened to. And then just the classics, Here Comes the Sun, their popular stuff. It's just a quintessential album, you know.
Yeah,
But
it's
it
just
didn't.
absolutely and utterly great.
I don't know why, but it just compared to the other ones, it didn't make it up there for
Yeah,
me.
I think at this point we're kind of going past what's a good album and more what's a personally good album because,
Right.
like, I wouldn't really consider Abbey Road to be a personal album to me. It's just one that I'm just like, hey, this is a great album. I think same with 21 by Adele. Like, I really like that album and it's really good. She has some of the most emotive singing out there, and her songwriting just really matches it, and the instrumentation just perfectly pairs with it. And it's like, there's not really anything negative that I would want to say about this album in particular, but it's just like, it's not an album I have a super close attachment to. Like, if I had grown up listening to it, it'd probably be way higher on my list, but since it's an album that I more recently discovered, it's not like I really fell in love with it, but it's just an incredible album.
Right. And I think with that, actually, no, I want to touch on In My Room a little. So we did talk about in the podcast that Jacob could be a little avant garde. And I think this album wasn't that. It was super listenable, but at the same time, there's a lot of stuff on there that I would listen to only if I want to be like, dang, that was so good. Not like, oh, let me listen to a song right now. Um,
Yeah, no, definitely for sure. I definitely I feel like we could have made like a top 4 because this is definitely just a great album. It definitely feels like this is kind of where it bleeds between like being like, okay, like these are mid albums in the list of them, and like these are personal favorites.
right.
I definitely do agree that sometimes I'm just like, Jacob Collier's a little bit busy for what I'm vibing with right now. Sometimes I'm just like, no, I'd rather just listen to something a little bit more simple and emotive than this, but it's still incredible. Like, Jacob Collier, I definitely think that this is probably his least avant garde work to date.
Right.
Like, maybe Jesse Volume 3. Like, Jesse Volume 3 has its moments of being weird. But this album is just altogether, like, solid front to back. You just get these really great moments of emotion on it, these emotional beats that people don't really associate with Jacob Collier. Like, in the Real Early Morning is, I think, my favorite track on this album by far. It's what I said when we recorded the episode way back in like September of last year, but it still kind of stands as my favorite track because it shows his capability of emoting so well. And I think if there were more moments like that on the album, it might have moved up a bit for me, but
Mm.
it kind of stands as a very technical masterpiece in that sense. But the top 3 albums for me are definitely a lot more emotive based. So, yeah, let's get into top 3. I am super duper excited for this.
Yeah. Okay. So I can go. So I think, well, for three, I had 21, two, I had Thriller, and one, I had Continuum. So I'll explain after, but you say your three.
All right, for 3, I had Dark Side of the Moon, the Pink Floyd album, the legendary, the Pink Side of the Floyd. At second, I had Continuum, and in first, I had the Black Parade. I don't think that would be any surprise to you. Like, it's like a freaking top 3 album for me. I just love it to death. It's so good. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I respect like those choices as well. Like, those are really good, solid. And I think if I went back, I probably would have put Black Parade in my top three. Now that I'm looking, I would have put either Thriller or 21 down and then put Black Parade up there because it was just so freaking good. Um, but yeah, I think 21 and Thriller, I think Attachments, as you said, carried that for me just because I grew up listening to both of those, and have really fond memories with them. But I think with Continuum, it just was so good. Like, I didn't necessarily grow up with Continuum except for maybe like Waiting on the World to Change or something like that. But like, it was, the songwriting was so good, the episode was so good, the the bluesy rock, like I just love it, you know.
Yeah, let's just keep talking about Continuum for a second. Now, out of all of the albums that we talked about on this podcast this season, how many of them had I listened to before? I'd listened to Dark Side of the Moon, Black Parade. I had listened. I listened to Baby I Miss You before I recommended it to us. And then I listened to Abbey Road and In My Room. So I listened to like 5 of the albums before actually coming into the podcast. And of the remaining 4, Continuum is by far the best find on this podcast. I'm so happy. Like, this is an album that I probably would have ended up listening to at some point, but I definitely think it was a perfect storm for me where it's just became one of my favorite albums because we listened to it and I was just like, okay, this is cool. And then I started writing down and I was like, oh, dang, this is really cool. And then we started talking about it and I was just like, oh, shoot.
This is
and,
hype.
Like, everything together makes this such a great album for me where it's like, it becomes a personal album for me. And now that I continue to go back and listen to it, it might have gone down a little, like it might have gone from like second down to fourth is all. Because I made this list like a while back.
Right, same.
So it definitely could potentially have gone a little bit lower. In My Room could have gone higher, but it's just so good. The guitar playing is insane, and the lyrics are really cool. Like, it's like John Mayer isn't someone who you like really think about of, oh, he's a lyrical master, but Continuum, he wove such a compelling narrative throughout the album. Even though it isn't technically a concept album, he just weaves this really compelling narrative. And I think even after like listening to Sob Rock, the latest John Mayer album, I'm just like, I can really take this album for granted. Like, I'm just like, yeah, it's just John Mayer. But then I listen to Sob Rock and I'm like, this is so solidly mid. Like, I don't have any, like, I have my issues with Sob Rock, but it's just like a perfectly okay album. But then I just go back and listen to Continue and I'm just like, this dude is a legend.
Yeah, it just stands out. I do want to say, I noticed something too. Like, my top 4 are all albums that I've heard before. Everything below it is stuff that I heard just on the podcast. Like, my top 4, Continuum, Thriller, 21, In My Room. Those are all things that I heard before the podcast. So I found that really interesting. Is that, did the familiarity carry that for me? Or, you know?
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's interesting to me.
Yeah, definitely. Even though, even like you being like, yeah, the Black Parade actually probably moves up for me. I think that's interesting because it's been like a month or 2 since we recorded our last episode.
Right.
And I think you've been given some time to just like let that album marinate a bit and just really process through how good it is. And just, you're just like, oh shoot, no, this album actually slaps, and you're like, I'd probably put it in my top 3.
Honestly.
And I think that that's really interesting because so often we as humans just kind of detest change. Like, even going out of my way to discover new music, sometimes I'm just like, nah, I just want to listen to the same album I've been listening to for the past 3 weeks. And then sometimes I'll step out and try something new and I'm like, okay, this is good. And then it takes me some time to warm up to it, right? Like, say for instance with the Black Parade even. The first time that I listened to it, I wasn't crazy about it. I was just like, what is this? And then I watched a video on the narrative or whatever, and it just kind of started listening through it again. And then I just listened through it more and more, and I was just like, oh shoot, I actually really like this album. And right now it's like my 3rd favorite album of all time on my favorite albums of all time list. And it's just got a great story. It's got, like, it has a lot of the punk elements or like the pop punk elements that make it really good. But I think what really sets it apart from the rest of the stuff in the genre at the time is they weren't afraid to experiment, right? And I don't remember how much I touched on this in the actual episode, but they went in with horns and they went in with these different instrumentations, and they went in with this whole narrative that kind of strays a bit from what you typically expect from punk music. And it wasn't just angry, it was sad, it was happy. It hit all of these different emotional beats, and it just, all of that makes it really, really good. And so that's why it's my favorite of the whole podcast. And now I think it's weird that I just kind of jumped off on that. Let me talk about Dark Side of the Moon real quick, the third one. Dark Side of the Moon was really good. It's probably my favorite. Is it my favorite? No, it's not my favorite prog record of all time, but it's way up there for me. I think it just stands out for me as just such a perfect piece of art. Where it's like with some albums they aren't perfect, but I just kind of love them. Even outside of that, like I think In My Room can kind of be that way, where it's like a technical masterpiece, but it misses a little bit. But Dark Side of the Moon is just like one of those things where it's just like it feels so complete as a work, and it ebbs and flows really well from start to finish. It has really great themes and lyrics and all that good jazz. And like when I'm listening to it, I just kind of feel like everything around me kind of disappears, and it's nothing but the world of Pink Floyd. And just overall really solid instrumentation across the board. I freaking love this album, man.
Yeah, I think for Dark Side of the Moon, actually no, I touched on that. I will touch on 21 though. I think I'm super biased, not even just because I grew up with it, but simply because I'm obsessed with ballads, and I've mentioned this before many times, and the fact that it has more than one 6/8 song on there, I believe.
I was gonna touch on that. I was gonna be like, yeah, he's a sucker for a 6/8 too.
I don't know why, bro. It's like in my DNA. So I just resonate with it for no reason other than it's just piano ballads with a 6/8 song. I was just like, yeah, that's top 3.
Yeah, and that explains like the "Oh Darling" is your favorite track on that album for Abbey Road.
I'm a simple man. I see 6/8 and I yeah.
Groove. You just kind of groove.
I just groove.
Yeah, I like just kind of imagine this scenario where you're just kind of sitting in a car, and then someone changes the radio over to a 6/8 song, and the next thing I know, you're just like absolutely grooving, just like you're just kind of like sitting there like nodding your head, and then you're just like banging into like every second beat of the 6/8. Just like
just the 6/8 classical piece, just like boom ding 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 ding.
Yeah, it's just so good. I love that picture. You want to touch a little bit more on Thriller? Because I had that one really low on my list because I think it's just outside of genres I'm really comfortable with. And I think on listening to it again, I'd probably be fine with moving it up a little bit, but still it's just kind of like super duper far outside of my comfort zone. So I just want to hear what you really like about it.
Yeah, so aside from the whole growing up with it, I think this is a genre that I'm super comfortable with. So I think just that those 80s pop elements, those funk elements, that's an arena that like I'm super familiar with, and that's like the dance music that I came up dancing to. Michael Jackson is just an amazing vocalist, as we know. It has a ballad on there at the end, so had a ballad, and then it just has the the Billie Jeans, the Thriller. I mean, honestly, I'm not someone that just sits and listens to Thriller or Beat It on a daily basis, because it's just too popular that I'm just like, I'm just, yeah.
And see, that's the interesting thing, because those two tracks are the ones that really stick out to me. But you have to realize the demographic of people I grew up hanging out with, it wasn't like I heard them 24/7. So it's like,
right.
Just like sitting down and listening to the guitar solo from Beat It, I still get that reaction of, oh, that's so tasty.
Yeah. And that's interesting, because I don't know if I played like Welcome to the Black Parade, like it came out yesterday, and then you hear me listening to it, like how would you react if I said like, oh, that's my favorite on the album? I don't know if it is, but like, yeah.
I certainly wouldn't fault you for that. I think the Black Parade as a song, Welcome to the Black Parade, is a very good song. It's definitely is probably the second best example on the album of them straying away from just like standard pop punk kind of sensibilities, if you will. But it's just so good. Like it's super anthemic. It's like you can just scream out the lyrics. It's so good. And like I also really haven't had to deal with the proverbial overplay octopus for that one, where I just heard it too much because
That's good.
there's kind of I've kind of hit a point in my life where I don't really listen to a lot of music with other people. Most of the
Mm,
music listening I do is by myself. So if I want to listen to the Black Parade, I just kind of go do it. And I'm just like I'm just super hyped when I get to that track, and then like I'm just like, yo, this track is so good. So I don't really have to deal with the overplay. And also again, like I only really started listening to the album a couple years ago. So it's not like it's a super duper old ingrained album for me in the same way that something like I don't know, like a Moving Pictures by Rush would be, where it's like I
right.
know every track front ways and back ways on that album. But yeah, no, that's definitely super interesting. The other thing that I really wanted to mention about Thriller that I gained an appreciation for, that I kind of realized, is with a lot of modern albums as a whole, you kind of have features being a major part of it. But back in like the 70s and 80s, that really wasn't a thing. Like
Mm,
people kind of did music as a singularity, where they're like, okay, like Pink Floyd is going to do a Pink Floyd album. Van Halen is going to do a Van Halen album. And then Michael Jackson's over here just like, okay, I'm gonna put a couple features on this album. And like, yeah, it was kind of like an all-star group of people working on the album as well. Like he had Quincy Jones, but he had both an Eddie Van Halen feature and a Paul McCartney feature.
just
And I think
casually,
it's one
like.
of the, just casually, and I think it's kind of set the tone of like, no, you can use other people on your album to make it great. And I think that
Right.
that's a trend that we've seen lately. And honestly, I'm a little bit biased against it because like I come from mostly a classic rock album where it's just like you don't see features. So a lot of times when I see features, I'm like, that might be a little bit tacky. But I think this album just kind of opened my eyes to like, no, they can be great.
Yeah, I have a mixed feeling about like collaborations and features because on the one hand, you get that feeling of when, say, your favorite show crosses over and you see like, I don't know, I can't think of an
Power
example.
Rangers and Teenage Mutant Ninja
Yeah,
Turtles.
yeah, or you see like, oh, Star Wars characters and Phineas and Ferb or something. Or
That was a
like,
great episode,
yeah,
man.
it
That
was
was so
awesome.
good.
That was like in that feeling of like, yo, this area of my life and this area of my life combined. I think I only really like collaborations when it's two people that I completely admire. If it's like, oh, Michael Jackson drops something, obviously he's not, but like he drops something with, say, I don't know, like Lil Baby or something. I don't listen to Lil Baby, so that collaboration's not gonna do anything for me. But say it's like
Yeah.
Michael Jackson and I don't know, say Pink Floyd, why not? Like, and it's like, yo, what? That's a combination. Then I'm intrigued, you know, because it's two people that I actually admire. So that's my thing with collaboration. I don't think it should be something that's just like flippant. Like I just put a bunch of people on my album so it looks like my album's good. Like DJ Khaled type thing, like, oh my gosh, there's like 30 people on this album, it has to be good, you know.
Yeah. I was gonna say along those lines, it's like you definitely have cases of people working together where it's like with Silk Sonic it's a little bit different of a thing because it's more like it's more of a super group where it's like very clear that the two of them want to make music together kind of going
Right.
forward, Bruno Mars and Anderson Paak. But like they were both already pretty established artists, and if they had released it as kind of like a collaboration album between the two of them, it would have been like it'd have been like, okay, that's cool. That's a great collab album. But then you have things like Ed Sheeran's collaborations number six,
uh
which is just like
Terrible.
awful, where it's just like, okay, like it's like music producers drew names from a hat to who to throw on this album, and it just kind of feels so hashed. It's very poorly hashed out, where it's just kind of like, yes, we're gonna make the money, yes.
Yeah, it's
So it's like
less.
I definitely feel those mixed feelings on collaborations, but then you just kind of get things that just like really work sometimes. And I think collaborations are really all about the stuff that happened on Thriller. Thriller did collaborations very well.
Yeah, and sparingly too, so it wasn't, you know, an overly done thing. So shout out to
Yeah,
Michael Jackson.
100%. Shout outs to Michael Jackson. So I think with this list, you kind of also, we could probably kind of make a combined list based on this. I feel like kind of the bottom two for us are "Baby I Miss You" and "Song for America." We both had those in our bottom
Yep.
three.
Middle we had "In My Room" and Abbey Road, and then top we both had "Continuum." I think, right?
Yeah, I think if we had to pick like three albums to just kind of recommend to people based on our collective lists, it'd probably be The Black Parade, Continuum, and In My Room.
Rob.
I'd say. Wait. The heck? We didn't plan this, guys. I swear. We did not plan this.
Wait a minute.
These are the frick. Oh my gosh. These are the three that we picked to recommend. Well, I guess you guys have I guess those are the best three albums on the list as well. I guess you have your listening cut out for you. It doesn't get much better than this in the worldwide of sports or whatever.
Crazy. That is wild.
That is definitely crazy because I was just like kind of thinking, okay, like what did we both have up really high? And you said you'd move up the Black Parade, and I was like, okay, we both have In My Room in fourth, so I guess that's a good one. And then I just noticed, oh shoot, like that's quite
It's
literally
the same thing. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, they were good. It just simply was good. So
Jacob Collier made it easy to make a podcast review of his album. John Mayer made it super easy. Gerard Way also made it super easy. And the boys there at My Chemical Romance.
yes,
So
sir.
yeah, that is the wrap up for season. So everybody get excited though, because season 2 is coming soon. We're probably gonna have a little bit of another break between this and the first episode of season 2. It's not going to be nearly as long as the break between this and the last episode.
No. Oh
We're
my
trying to get back
gosh.
up to consistency, but what we generally like to do is we like to record a couple before we start putting them out. That way we have a little bit of a buffer.
Right.
And so yeah, season 2 is going to
It's
be
gonna
lit.
be so good. All I'm gonna
Um,
say is that we got some people coming through. That's all I'm gonna
We got-
say.
We got some people coming through. We got some guests, and you might see us just kind of adding people on Instagram from our official page. And our Instagram page does follow a few people. If you really want a sneak peek, you
Link.
can-
Oh
Link?
man, it's gonna be so fun. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So we got some other things in store that we'll announce at the start of season 2. But yeah, go ahead and drop your favorite album from the series in the comments below. And if you're new to the podcast, welcome. Glad you found this one for your first one.
Get some
Definitely a good one to
suggestions.
start with. And yeah, give us some suggestions. We got to go through all of our guest episodes first because we had them pick the album so that we could branch out further from our music tastes. Because yeah, we have like a good amount of variety in our first few episodes, but we had a couple prog albums. We had a couple classic rock albums. We had some R&B. We did have our kind of like
Yeah, our arenas.
things that we were already familiar with. So
Yeah,
we're
these
gonna be
people are
getting
gonna
into some
they're
really
gonna take
weird
us
stuff.
places, but we'll talk about that next season.
Yeah, next season. Thank you guys for listening to season 1. I'm Ryan,
I am Malachi.
and you're watching the Disney Channel. All right, we're stopping recording there.
Da, 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 do.